All right, welcome back, guys. So now that we talked about the start of the war and the U.S. getting pulled into the war, we're now going to start talking about the war on at home. Like I said before, AP class or AP tests tend to focus more on the changes that war causes to the United States on a societal or cultural level, not necessarily battles as much. So we're going to spend more time talking about what this war does to us, broadly speaking. All right, so here's what you'll need. There's a few things posted on Canvas for you. Japanese internment student handout. You'll need that. I think it's about 3 pages. Set of Japanese internment docs, which are some brief readings that you'll need two parts for, or both parts for. And then there's going to be a link I want to a video I want you to watch on Japanese internment. So here's the deal. When this is all over, all right, it's labeled as a quiz. It's not actually really a quiz. What I'm basically asking you to do here over the course of this assignment is to assess and analyze Japanese internment to determine what the threat level was and what actions would have been considered reasonable and most practical. And then also, after we understand what was actually done during the Japanese internment, how we should kind of view this moment in history. All right. And so that quiz that I referenced on the screen right here is you basically telling me what you would do and then explaining why. It's going to be an informal grade, just so that it would be normally something I would give you as like a half sheet, but this is the best way I can do this. So the way I'm going to run this lesson is to try to give you as much of that experience in the classroom as I can virtually. We'll see how it goes. Just trying to, give you, the level of education or attention you would normally get. So let's get started. So when we start thinking about Japanese internment, I want to start by looking at these two pictures. So why don't we start down here on this bottom one, right? If we look at this one, you will notice and hopefully recognize what it's from, right? A couple clues here is that you can tell by the look of these gentlemen and also the clothing that they're wearing. This is obviously a photo from the Holocaust. These men are obviously in a camp, right? The striped pants, striped pajamas. That is a book I think most of you read in middle school, The Boy in Striped Pajamas. Meanwhile, if we go up here and we look at the picture at the top, you'll notice that this is not from the Holocaust, but rather this is from an internment camp of the Japanese or Japanese Americans in the United States. Now, obviously, this goes without saying. The end result of the Holocaust doesn't even is obviously so far ahead and much, 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 much worse than what happened with the Japanese. But the visuals that we see in these two pictures show that these things are kind of both obviously terrible. The look of basically jailing an entire collection of people and putting them in camps um, is awful. And so obviously, again, stressing here that the actions taken by the Germans are far worse than anything we did, but still, it is not look good for America to have done something as close to this as we did. All right, so with that being said, here's what I want you to do as your warm up. At the top of your sheet, you'll see a chart here, right? At the chart, you will see some examples of things the U.S. did over the course of our history. I've stressed this from the very beginning. They love themes and trends in American history, right? So here's what I'm asking you to do. Step one, um, if you need to use your notes, figure out what the purpose and actual actions of these laws were so that you can remember what they are. Because again, we're looking at this broader trend here. If you need to look at your notes, the internet, whatever it is, just make sure you understand what these things are. It's just good, helpful review. And then here's the other thing I want you to do, right? I want you to look at those laws did and the circumstances around them, and then assess how severe you think they were, right? What we want to understand here is, or what we'd like to do here is try to take Japanese internment and previous actions of the US government and just kind of do a side by side comparison, an analysis of, how do these stack up with one another, right? All right, so pause me and go on and do that. All right, so hopefully you've done what you're supposed to do. So when we start looking at these collection things, a couple things we want to notice, and again, I've talked about this before, is that John Adams was a second president of the United States, right? Um, Essentially at the very early stages of American history. We are talking about, in terms of the assignment working on it, we go all the way up through World War II. That's obviously much more recent history. And so what we want to do is we want to look at these actions taken by the government that we see over the Alien Act, Sedition Act, Suspension of Habeas Corpus, Sedition Act of World War One, and then the Espionage Act. So what are we noticing? What's in common, right? What did you find that made these things similar? All right. So I think hopefully you realize really quickly that during a time of war, the United States tends to clamp down very strictly and very harshly on laws, not on laws, but on rights, right? Now, here's the thing. When we're talking about things like the Sedition Acts, right, or even the Espionage Acts, we're talking about the suppression of kind of a First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech, maybe freedom to assemble, freedom of the press. That's where those kind of fall in play, right? And then suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War, that's going to be suspension of due process. Being thrown in jail without getting a trial, being held as an enemy combatant, even though you're a U.S. citizen. So here's the thing, and this is up to you to decide. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad were these? All right. And then when we're done talking about the Japanese internment, do we feel as if Japanese internment is at the same level, not as bad, or arguably maybe even worse than the things we've done previously? All right. So here's what I want you to do. Using the next section of your piece of paper or your chart or your handout, I now want you to go and I want you to go and look at the PDF that I put on Canvas. It's got both readings A and B. You want to be looking at reading A concerning A, protecting against blah, blah, blah. All right, so here's what you want to do. You'll see there's those three categories, the three issues that need to be addressed. Read that brief little passage and then figure out the details of each of those. All right. And then here's the thing. Um, on the next screen, I'm going to give you options. And again, you are serving as the advisor to FDR. You're going to have to give him advice. So first of all, get the basic background information. Understand the three concerns that are currently facing America. Go ahead and pause it, and then we'll look at the options. All right, so here's the options you have for FDR, right? Okay, so option A, place all Germans, Japanese, and Italians in an armed camp, roughly 1 million people. That's a lot of people. All right, B, only intern Germans, Japanese, Italians who seem disloyal. C, place all Japanese citizens and Japanese Americans, no matter of age, gender, or place of birth, in camps away from coastal areas. D, create a zone around military facilities and require passes for entry. Or E, deal with the individuals on a case by case basis, then jail or intern threats. All right, so these are your options, okay? Now, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit here as you begin to weigh what you would do. I see some problems with essentially every single one of them. Let's start with the idea of interning all these people, option A. How many people are you going to pull out of the workforce? All right. And I don't just mean, the people who you're putting in essentially jail, but you're also talking about you will need military personnel. You will need to build the camps. You will need to take resources. This is an exorbitantly expensive thing in many, many ways, and it would take time. So as you're building up these camps, what are you doing with these people? So can you financially afford this, and can you afford the loss of manpower to do this? All right, B and E, I'm going to kind of take as the pro and cons together here. If you only intern people who are threats, or you investigate people and deal with them individually, there's another problem here, right? Um, we know there were Japanese spies in Honolulu, right? We knew that there were Japanese aiding them with Pearl Harbor. We know that a Japanese submarine came off the coast of California. And there was that one terrorist attack they mentioned in the reading. Whoa, what if you take too long to do all this? What if you don't find that person fast enough and they do something terrible, right? Um, you'll have some serious problems. Not to mention again, manpower. Where are you going to get the people to do all this investigation? All right, so then let's talk about C. You can place all Japanese citizens and all Japanese American citizens into camps. Get them away from the coastal region. Now let's talk about why they want to put them off the coast. There was a serious concern that Japanese citizens and Japanese Americans would, if there was a Japanese invasion, would join force, right? They would join with the Japanese or work as an insurgency. So get them off the coast so they can't help the Japanese. So if the Japanese do land, they're too far away to do any good. Here's the problem. How many people are you putting in a camp without due process? Will there be innocent people? Yeah, probably mostly. Almost every single person they'll put in a camp will probably be innocent. And especially if you're talking about people who are children, the elderly, what threat do they pose, right? So you're clearly going to be violating the Constitution there. Lastly, create a zone around military facilities and require passes for entry. So the idea here is this, that you don't want people spying on military facilities, the coming and goings of maybe Navy boats or soldiers, whatever it is. So you create this buffer zone around these bases so that you screen whoever goes in and out. Again, where are you getting the people, right? Where are you going to get the people to carry this out? And does that ultimately solve the problem of a potential insurgency? Does that solve the problem, quote, problem of them joining the Japanese invasion? Not really. So pick the one you think is best. All right. And remember, you're going to be doing something later. We're going to explain why you picked it. All right. So a couple things, a couple of Japanese pieces of propaganda that anti-Japanese propaganda we want to look at. Both of them are basically dehumanizing or vilifying the Japanese, which will explain ultimately what we do, right? Um, in case you don't know already, you haven't read the AMSCO book yet, but we're going to ultimately pick option C. We're going to put these people into camps. And you can see how that could have happened because if you start looking at this propaganda here, whether it's making them out to be caricatures that are ridiculous, and let's see, this between the teeth and the ears made to look like, they're basically stereotypes, or some type of dangerous, murderous human beings who, again, stay on the job until every murdering Jap is wiped out. If that's the communication you're giving to your people about what Japanese people are like, yeah, they're not going to be really interested in protecting their rights. So here's what I want you to do now. All right, just like before, you need background information. So first thing, read the brief article, the one-page article, Part B. It's in a PDF, same one you were looking at before. But I also want you to watch this video on Japanese internment. So the video guide and those things together will give you the background information you need. So go ahead and hit pause on me and go and do that. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Just like we did last time, I'm going to give you some options here, right? How do we ultimately? Here's what we're doing. We're not advising FDR. We're now basically on a subcommittee looking back upon these events and going, how should we view our internment of the Japanese? All right, and so here are the three avenues or three ways we can look at it. So, how do you think we should view this executive order 9066? A, it was carried out. The way it was carried out was wrong. We should be ashamed. Okay. B, the execution was the problem. We were at war, and I can understand why it was necessary. All right. Or C, it was a military necessity, and we had no choice. The way we execute it can be justified. So essentially, we have the full, relatively full range here, right? We didn't do anything wrong. Everything we did was fine. Don't worry about it. To how dare we? I'm embarrassed. There's no way we should feel good about this. And then there's that middle one. The problem was the execution, right? So let's take a second and process each one of these. All right. So if you're going to go with A, right, you're essentially suggesting that the threats maybe weren't real, they weren't serious, they weren't a problem that needed to be addressed. Okay. Um, but from our research, we know that there were at least some level of threat, maybe not as severe as they thought, but there were definitely like some level of threat versus down here. C was military necessity, had no choice. But again, think about what happened to the Japanese Americans. They were forced to sell their homes for basically nothing. They lost businesses. There was all this wealth, all these rights, and they just went along with it. And then to be basically shoved into camps um, and then forced to build them yourself in terrible conditions, they basically said you as a person who of a certain ethnic group, even if you were born here, may not be loyal. That's what they basically said. Or B, the problem was real. The issue was that we just didn't execute it properly. All right, so you pick the one you think is the best option to explain or to assess all of this. All right, so now that you've done this on Canvas, again, it's not an actual quiz. I want you to spell out what you selected and why you selected it. So you'll start with part A, which of those five options. Then you'll explain to me why you pick that using very specific things. So you will be graded on this looking for a clear, definitive action or reason with specific information and facts to back up your argument. And then you'll do the same thing for part B about how we should feel about Japanese internment. All right, so again, this is not a quiz. There will be an informal grade attached to it. I will be looking for, again, you to clearly identify an argument and then provide the evidence to support that argument. All right, if you have any questions or you're confused, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Use the discussion board that I've got in Canvas for you so that you guys can, feel comfortable with what you're going to be doing. All right, guys, see you on the next one.